All right, we are back again with the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. And today we have a very, very special guest. I'm very, very excited for this. And I know you guys are too. Fort Worth Playboy and my Playboy's Bunny, otherwise known as Fort Worth and Bunny, going forward throughout this podcast. How are you guys doing today?
We are good. Hello.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting conversation because I think, people are really, really intrigued by the dynamic that you guys have, and I definitely want to dig into that because I know a lot of people are wondering, how does that work, and can I have that for me too, and
yes.
So can you give us a little bit of a background? How did you guys meet, and sort of what's the nature of your dynamic? Are you guys in a long-term relationship? Are you married? What's the situation?
Well, we met online, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And, as a basic, she fell into my system, my funnel pretty much. And I met up with her.
I fell into it in line perfectly. I tell him that he was working on his dating system for so long that it was all meant to work perfectly on me.
Okay, so let's start there then. Like, tell us about the system. What is the system?
The system, I live in an entertainment district, and I moved here when I got divorced, and I was living in one of my gyms that I owned. And I knew that was a bad idea. I moved to a nice neighborhood that would be, keep me from getting depressed. So I kind of, over time, I built up, reading Royacy, Rouge, all the earlier writers, just kind of built up like a 3-location system where I would take girls on a first date or second date, depending on, what I thought would work, and just got my close rate down, over time. And so what I thought was just I was going to go meet like another middle class mom, and just kind of feel it out and see how it goes.
You felt it out.
Yeah. And then we were just, hanging out and talking. She said, I got to go to the bathroom. She jumps down.
I did not say
she kind of whips around, and she's like, skittering off with these heels and this teeny tiny little waist. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to have some of that. And from that point on, I was like completely like neutral, and I like completely turned on my game immediately. It just started working as hard as I could.
And I've never left.
No. And so that, because I put her in the system, she kind of like, when we talk about it like the podcast, she actually knows what it means. Like, we bounced her down the street to another bar.
Oh, he took me all over the place. He literally took me to 3 different bars, essentially right next to one another. But he took routes that made it seem like we were walking for a block. It was, it was all just seamless. It was incredible.
And then,
and all these places were near your spot, near your apartment?
Yeah, literally like on the same block, one city block.
Yeah.
And then we're at the last place. I said, hey, you want to come up to my bar? She's like, where's that? And I go, it's that window right up there. So literally she knew that it was like, it all comes together.
It was
like,
so good. So good. And we do get, pushback, feedback from women who are like, well, doesn't that cheapen the experience that, maybe he's had other first kisses in the same plan and layout that you did? And I'm like, hell no, it worked out perfectly. I still had the perfect first date ever, the most perfect first date ever. It was a win-win for me. And it would have been even if we hadn't ended up establishing a long-term relationship.
Yeah, because the idea is to have a good time.
Make no mistake, I would have had great feelings about it, even if we hadn't necessarily become what we have.
Right, because it was just a smooth, enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women, like, on one hand, I kind of get it. You don't want to necessarily feel like you're just, another number. But on the other hand, I think a lot of women really go out of their way to find something to be upset about.
Yes.
Like, does any woman realistically think that a guy is going to pull off a super smooth date like that if he doesn't have some degree of experience?
Exactly. Well, and that's my rebuttal also, Pat, is, so you think that you don't have the same conversations over and over and over again, whether it be about the weather, whether it be your favorite restaurants, like you revisit places that work for you. You revisit conversations that are easy to have with new people. All of these things, everything that we do in life is just a recycled version of what we did in life yesterday in a lot of ways. So why would this be any different? And it works.
Right.
I became Miss Wednesday and Miss Saturday, or Miss Wednesday, and then quickly Miss Wednesday and Miss Saturday, and now I'm Miss Every Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stick with your system, guys.
I won.
Yeah, and I think this really goes and underlines something, and I'm hoping that Fort Worth, you can talk a little bit more about this for guys, because logistics really gets ignored, and I'll make like some sort of just general analogy with it. Like, if you look at game, kind of like even like with war, I mean, everyone talks about different like battle arrangements and stuff like that. If you're like nerdy dudes and stuff like that, they'll go and assess these kind of things. But no one ever thinks about like, well, what were the logistics that made that happen? It's identical with game. You can run fantastic game, but if you're living in, your mom's house, which is 2 hours away.
Yeah.
Like, how's that gonna work? So So go talk to us a little bit about like what you do for logistics. I mean, we got a little bit of a teaser from that based on how you described that first date, but just kind of take me through it.
Yeah, and I realized very quickly, I was like, I need to know where I'm going. I needed to not be too loud. I needed to not be dead. So I kind of like scouted places, and you can do this as easy as going to lunch or just going out in the evening, and you realize, this would be a good place to bring a girl, because some places aren't good for logistics. And so that's what if I found a spot close to the apartment, I just reuse it. And we've talked about that, like on a couple of the podcasts, was like, you think by the fourth or fifth time you come in, they're like, hey, how are you doing? And at first it made me uncomfortable. The girl would look at me. Like she knows that I'm running a lot of girls. And at first I thought this is bad. Then I realized this is very good.
Yeah.
One, she wants to be around guys that are familiar with women.
Yeah.
Two, it's so rare because, I think you're in New York City, almost everybody's anonymous.
Yeah.
So when you actually go into a place and people know you, it helps comfort her. You're like known in the area, which is very rare today, even in like a city as small as Fort Worth. And then just that personal attention. And so that's what I did, was I started repeating the places that work, and if some place didn't work, because it was like Wednesday night was heavy metal night, I knew to avoid that. But that's how I did it, was just scouting, just like you would anything else, and knowing exactly where to go and just keeping it close, because girls are almost always going to be in heels.
Yeah.
And we want them to walk.
Right.
And if they walk a half mile, they're pissed off and their feet hurt. So you want it close, and just doing this homework really helps. And you're right. Like one guy posted the other day, mid-level game and great logistics will beat great game in a 45-minute drive.
Exactly.
Just like you said. But guys don't put, like it's a podcast. It's one of the least viewed. Everybody, not that many people actually watch it. We've noticed that with the dating tips. I think a lot of guys, I know that. I got that.
Yeah, they assume they know everything already.
And I think it's just because it's not sexy, and a lot of people, like a lot of guys, they want to understand, they want to learn, like, what's this like weird trick in female psychology, You know, what's this like? They want to have that kind of advantage, and they don't want to hear a really simple, obvious answer, which is that, you know, one weird trick to get women to sleep with you easily is to not make them walk a mile.
Yeah,
Right.
it goes a long way.
like literally to have your apartment next to the bar that you've taken it to. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's the
Listen,
weird
it's
trick.
very noisy, but it works.
Yeah, and you know, I've grappled with some clients before, because they'll talk about, okay, well, what new, like, which, like, should I move to this spot? It's like a bigger location, but you know, it's 45 minutes, like it's out of the city center, or should I get this other spot, which is like, you know, pretty nice, but it's a little bit smaller, but it's got great
Right.
location. And I'm like, you got to go for the location if you want to.
Every time.
Yeah.
Well, and we answer a lot of questions from guys who struggle because they don't have the opportunity to live in a city central. You know, it's just, it does change logistics if all you have in your area is an Applebee's, a 7-Eleven, you know, just kind of the basic stuff. But that's where we talk about even moving them around that restaurant, starting at the bar, going to a patio, seating at the table. You know, you can still kind of work the system and allow it to work for you.
And for our guys go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For our guys way out in the country, we're like, you can take them for a drive. And you know, country people, they know you're driving 20 to 30 minutes no matter what.
Yeah.
And then you're just close to the house.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just going to drop in here for a second. You want to see my guitar? You know, you can just, you can go from there. You use the same system, but logistics change a little bit. But good logistics go a long way. And I don't know why guys don't realize this. It's just like going to work out. You tend to have routines.
Yeah.
So you can get stronger. You don't need a new date system every time you go out. You take the same one so you can improve upon it.
Yeah.
You know, you hit the same circuit of restaurants or bars, and that way you can improve your game.
Well, yeah. You know what you're talking about here is a concept I've talked about as like pre-selection. And when you're going to a bar or a restaurant and you've been there regularly, you have two advantages. First off, you feel very comfortable in it. It's almost like it's your house, and the other people.
It's a home field.
Yeah. You know, it's like, so if you can be more friendly to people even there, even strangers there. Like you could do this for like just a bar, even if you're trying to meet girls at the bar. Having the bar be a regular place, like you're gonna feel like, you know the staff, you know the bartenders, you just feel comfortable. It's not like you're the interloper, it's the girl who's come to your spot, and you have that natural psychological advantage. But you also have the fact that when staff knows you and treats you well, then your value automatically goes up, and the girl can feel it. So, I mean, I think that there's something to be said about trying out new spots, but not on early stages of dating.
Well, and I will say, from a female perspective, that also makes her feel more safe because there's a comfort there. You're there with someone who you don't know if you can trust, but at the same time, this is familiar. Everyone around here is familiar with him. So it's not like he's some guy who's fly by night. You know, there's a stationary aspect to it that goes a long way psychologically for the female.
Yeah. It really is a win-win across the board. You know, if you want to go try someplace new, either scope it out by yourself, or once you've been seeing a girl for a while, you know, you can check it out then. I don't think there's a big deal at that point. But yeah, I had a wine bar that I would go to, you know, and the waitresses would always give me this kind of like look and smile, you know, because it would be different day of the week, different girl, same thing. You always tip well, though. I think this is another thing that guys can be super penny wise, pound foolish. Like if you want the staff to work for you at a place like that, you got to tip well.
Well, and Fort Worth I still don't know how he did it, and he never says anything whenever I mention this to give me any indication as to how he did it. he had one bartender in particular who always knew my name.
Mm.
You know, she asked my name the first time we went to her bar, and she called me by name every time we ever went thereafter. And it could be a month or two between times that we hit that place. I was like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And I always say over tip.
Yes.
Because it's good programming too for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they benefit, you benefit, everybody benefits.
Yep. Yeah, it helps you think more abundantly.
Exactly.
Now I'm gonna track back a bit. So tell me, like, so you said you went through a divorce about what 5-6 years ago, is that right?
It'd be 10 years now.
10 years now. Okay. Oh yeah, you guys started getting together about 5 years ago. So you know, so tell me a little bit about that and how that took you. It sounds like it took you into like the red pill territory.
Well, like she would say, I had a lot of natural advantages earlier on, kind of like discovering weightlifting when I was like 14,
Mm-hmm.
working in gyms, working at a comedy club, bouncing at one of the last great singles bars. So once in retrospect, I realized I was learning a lot on the ground.
And make no mistake, he comes from a charismatic family as well. So his father was charismatic. You know, he came with a lot of natural characteristics already.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was married for 12 years. And then when I got divorced, I kind of discovered Tyler with RSD.
Oh yeah.
When he was really getting into the self-improvement, he had no staff. It was just him. I don't think he was doing boot camps. He was just doing speaking engagements. And so from a self-improvement, because, you know, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of self-improvement, you know, Think and Grow Rich, all of the classic mental stuff, psycho-cybernetics and Dan Kennedy. And so from that was where I got my introduction, was from a self-improvement aspect. Not so much I need to pick up girls, but then it just kind of like, I was like, this is interesting. And then I got more into it. And when I discovered Chateau Artiste, you know, I need to catch up at that point. And I started reading him like an hour a night for 2 years, like just like you do, like you lift weights consistently over time and just let it build up, and applied it. And that's really how I kind of came in at an angle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So with the marriage itself, I mean, do you mind sharing what happened? What kind of like what led
it was what led us to divorce. High business stress, not a shared vision of the future, and lots of children. I mean, we have 4 together, and she was pregnant when she actually filed for divorce every time she got pregnant. and no other time. I mean, it was like, why every time? She goes, it's when I can really see you for who you are. I'm like, okay, let's just back it down a little bit. Then she'd have the baby and forget about it because you're busy.
Yeah.
So that was it, you know. But she punched it all the way through. But you know, you can't get a divorce while you're pregnant in Texas. So.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
No.
They must have known about this.
Yeah,
no kidding.
exactly.
That's
It's twofold. But you know, it was two gyms that are always a pain in the ass to run. Lots of driving back and forth, and just lots of stress. At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And logistically, we were like 30, 45 minutes from the nearest gym, a good hour and a half from the second. You know, it was just a lot for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where we were.
Gotcha. Now, would you say that when you got into Tyler and then eventually getting into Heartrease stuff, was this like all very eye-opening for you, or would you say that you were already kind of naturally alpha, so to speak?
No, it was very eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Now that makes sense, because just like with anything in game, you can look back, you know, anybody, let's say they're 30, 35, and you say, does this work? We can look at your own history and you can see where it works exactly as it describes. or even like, Rollo, where he says, at this age range, girls are ready to party. At this age range, they start looking for kids. And you can look back and you're like, yeah, at about 28, she started losing her mind. And she was like ready for kids. And all these girls, like, they literally, like, a timer goes off and they're like,
It's true.
my eggs are you ready to hatch?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, it was very eye-opening. And I'd say only in the last year or two have I kind of like been able to look at my own past, like before I was married, and seeing where I had a lot of this stuff going in the right direction as it was.
Yeah.
I had a lot of experience, but I had no idea how it happened. Does that make sense?
It just happened.
Yep.
It just happened.
Sex just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got lucky in a lot of places. In high school, I got an extemporaneous speaking where you speak off the cuff about a subject, and improvisation. I was in theater. All these things help a guy when he's in front of chicks.
Well, and something that he forgets to mention a lot is he also worked at one of the biggest water parks in Texas for 6 years. He did nothing but for 9 months a year spend them around bikini-clad women. And, when he was like 18, 19, 22. So he had a lot of practice.
And mentors.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of unconscious competence, but you didn't necessarily understand why some things worked and why they didn't work.
Didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it just worked.
He was too busy fucking.
Yeah, and lifting weights. That was it. Because
he had to date me, Pat, because I'm the only one he hadn't dated yet. That's why I'm still around. That's the real secret.
Wait, yeah. So I got to hear about your story too, Bunny. So
yeah, no kidding.
So take me through, like, where were you at 5 years, like 10 years ago now?
Well, 10 years ago, I was married. I was essentially a stay-at-home mom, and loving life and taking names. I mean, Fort Worth was actually my very first date after 2 years after my divorce. And I was a nervous wreck. And I thought I was being stood up because his dating system is to be half an hour late. I thought, I must be hideous because I am sitting here at this bar drinking a martini alone. And yeah, I thought I was being stood up. I was so relieved when I saw him walking past the window.
It's part of the system.
It worked.
I definitely want to get into the system in detail, but first, what happened with your marriage?
I can honestly say that I would still be married. I got married to stay married the rest of my life, and we had a great family. My ex-husband battles with alcoholism, and now he also, before I met him, he also had a full career as a firefighter and had some serious accidents in that line of work. And only since we divorced, he actually was diagnosed with PTSD. And so those two things go hand in hand. I didn't know that we were dealing with that at the time, or I might. It dissolved, it just wasn't always pretty. He is a great father to our kids. Between us, we had his, mine, and ours. We had 5 children all told, and just, I love my family, and I love having us all together. We always had all the kids living at home with us, even his children, and that were from a previous marriage. So we always had just a really neat environment, but the bottom line was that the two of us just couldn't continue because he had a lot of demons he was working through, bottom line. And because I didn't know probably all that I was dealing with, I didn't always handle things as well as I should have either.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And so when you met Fort Worth, I mean, obviously you were smitten, it sounds like.
I sure was. I went running up to him as soon as he hit the door because I was so relieved to be actually on a date and not being stood up alone.
Now, you said that you met online, is that right?
Yes, we met on at one of the dating apps.
Okay. Now, Fort Worth, was there a system to that you had online that you would apply? So kind of just take us through the whole
Yeah.
system.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I got lucky just kind of like working my way through, the first couple coming from marketing, I already kind of had a leg up. I knew that good pictures would help. I knew a short, pithy bio with a little humor would help. And it just seemed to work okay. It seemed to like get the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say the first year or so, I was still like texting back and forth too much. And then as I kind of built up some experience, I was like, 2 or 3 texts, I need to get them onto the phone. I need to get them in front of me. That's when I realized this whole online dating is being misused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The only reason it exists is to get girls in front of you. That's
Right.
it. Nothing else. Too many people are like getting distracted with a text relationship or anything other than moving her physically in front of you is kind of a waste of time.
Well, and I saw your tweet the other day, that mentioned that apps are not what they used to be, which may very well be true. However, I think that's because people do lose sight of the real purpose of them. And it's exactly what he just said, that it's to say, am I interested enough in this person to spend an hour with them, finding out if there's actual interest, moving them from the app to text or phone and getting them in front of you as quickly as possible. It's just a step in the system. It's more poles in the water.
When I wrote my book Tackling Texting, which was based on my experiences about like a decade ago, and it still holds true today. It's exactly what you're saying. I mean, the only reason to text a girl is to get her out on a date, or to add value, and the only reason you're adding value is to get her on a date.
Yeah.
So otherwise, if it doesn't fit into one of those two criteria, then there's just no point in doing it. And a lot of guys they're so eager for a woman's attention and for a woman's validation that they think if she's responding, then like, well, as long as she keeps responding to me and we keep interacting, we have a conversation, then, I'm in the game. It's like, well, what kind of game are you even playing? Like what?
You're not moving in the right direction.
Yeah, like what's your objective here? So yeah, 100%. So in your system, you would send just a few messages basically, and then you would immediately go for the phone number.
Yes, as few as I could get, and I basically had the same question. She's got our original text exchanges.
I actually to my newsletter list, I actually sent out the actuals. I went back to the app and looked at the actuals, took screenshots of our initial conversations, and it was really fun. We had a lot of fun looking back and it was a well-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is like, as you get better, you can read in between the lines more quickly and with more accuracy.
Yes.
And you get down to about 3 or 4. And I sometimes like a Playboy Apollo. I don't know if you're even, because these are really out there just kind of texting guys. Hey woman, you'll get 2 or 3, if she's sending them his number or her number, and just as few as possible to get her off that app, and then get her on the text, and then as few as possible to get her in front of you.
Now, I'm curious, do you think that there's been any modification to some of these rules recently? Because that was always my approach and my strategy, but I've heard that today a lot of women are more resistant to that. They're more open to like, you get them on Instagram or something like that. They'll give out their Instagram. And I was initially very against that, but now I've kind of thought, well, if you have a good Instagram account, is it more effective in the end if you get them actually on Instagram, because then they can see that, and then it's like you can shore up the lead. I'm just kind of curious what your perspective is on that.
You tell me, because you're getting more feedback from guys that are getting her Instagram.
I can see how that would make a lot of sense. Like you say, I think the key would be that he have a pretty decent, profile there. But then it's, from what I'm understanding from what you're saying, is they're essentially giving the Instagram instead of the phone, and then they're messaging there.
Yeah.
I think that makes pretty good sense, because then you get a lot bigger picture of the kind of life that everyone's leading. You have a better idea of really who you're talking to.
But what is the contact rate? Are they actually getting these girls in front of them?
Yeah. If the Instagram is put together well,
right,
then it's really, really high close rate. And also, if you were doing just like even cold approach, it makes it a lot easier. You're in a cafe, you start to talk to a girl in a cafe, for instance, and it might be in that context, like, obviously, you get a girl's number, that's the old school thing to do, but there's almost like a higher threshold of tension, and then there's a higher flake rate from a girl, so she's maybe more resistant to give her number out to a guy she just met, or if she does give it out, she's like, well, maybe I'm not gonna respond to him. It's gonna
yeah.
Like, but if you said, oh, give me your Instagram, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's safer.
Yeah, I think it's a great plan.
As long as it's working, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was years ago when I first heard that this was happening. I was like, no, that's bad, because that's lower investment. But
right.
I think you got to
evolve. Maybe a tipping point.
Well, yeah. and watching my own kids, and their use of social media, they truly use the social media platforms as their communication platforms. They don't use text. They clearly don't use the phone, but but they do communicate with their friends exclusively via social media platforms. So it makes perfect sense. It's truly just their version of text messaging.
And it may come down to age.
Yeah, as well. Would you, Fort Worth, would you call girls before dates after you get them online? No.
I tried it a couple times, and they can just ignore the call. It's kind of awkward. Now, some of the older guys insist on it. Yeah. And again, if it works for them, that's all that matters. But I tried it a couple times and it wasn't too keen on it.
Yeah, because exactly as you said, a lot of girls will just not pick up. And then you're at a disadvantage.
Decline.
And you're like, well, what do I do? I leave a voice.
What do I do now? Yeah. Go knock on her door. Is JD here?
Oh my God. I do think something that has been like an interesting little hybrid that's worked pretty well was sending voice notes. So
I like that. That's a great idea.
Because that way she can get a real sense of your energy through your voice, but it's not doesn't again have that high pressure aspect of
interaction.
Yeah, of having to be on the phone and having to talk or whatever for a period of time.
I think that's a really good idea. I like that a lot.
So, okay, so we had this first date. Take it, you went home with him, right, Bunny?
I sure did.
So what did it look like after that?
Naked, very naked.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not what you mean, Pat. I'm so sorry.
She left. You left that night, didn't you? Yeah. She says I hit one or two. I'm like, I don't believe this. There's so many misremembering.
I remember the correct way, and you don't. Anyway.
But I knew at that point, any girls that I was seeing, I wanted to see them once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even remember. Maybe it was like Black Dragon or Caleb.
That
from. And it was working very well until you have someone shows up that wants to throw your system off, because they want to come in more than once a week.
Whatever.
And that's, she was Wednesday, 10 a.m.
No, we would go Saturdays. I was actually first Saturday. That's actually accurate. And then, and that was because of my kid situation. I still had all my kiddos in the house. But then we started meeting up like on Wednesdays during the day when the kids were at school. It was like, you know, I would call it a lunch, but you guys know better.
Only adults are out.
So that was always a fun way to spend the day. And yeah.
So how did your relationship evolve into what it is today? Like, how did you whittle him down? And I'm also,
how did you wear me down?
That's what we do. No, women wage wars of attrition.
Yeah.
It's, well, you know what? It is funny because so we started dating in November. And in March, is my birthday. And pretty soon I said, hey, I'm planning this trip to go see my girlfriends, or, you know, my go where I believe is kind of call home, which is back in Wisconsin. I said, I'm going there for my birthday. Do you want to come? And he was like, yeah, I'll come. He happened to have business contacts there as well. And so it was perfect. When we were there at one point, we were both just getting ready and we were having a great time on our trip. He was able to get some business done. I was able to have time with the girls. You know, we all came together with the husbands and boyfriends and such for dinners and things. It was just a great time. One night that we were getting ready, he said, so what would you do to get rid of all the other girls? And I said, well, first of all, that's a horrible question to ask because it's just cruel. You know, right now I'm with you, so I don't really like this question. But I said, the bottom line is I would keep doing exactly what I'm doing because that's all I can do. If you like that about me, then you want to spend more time with me. If you don't, then that's my answer also. And truly, that's all that happened. He even said after that trip, about a week later, one night we were talking on the phone and he said, you know what I appreciate about you is that we got back from traveling together for the first time and you didn't start going all girl weird. You know, you didn't start, well, where is this going? You know, we just fell right back into the routine that we have at home. And I was kind of like, well, yeah, you know, I know what's going, I know the story. And it's not that I knew that he was quote unquote running a rotation, but I knew that he did other things with other girls. And, you know, I share pretty often that it's not, you know, he would tell a story about a girl or like an encounter or something some girl said or some funny tidbit in conversation, and you wouldn't be able to tell if it was from his teenage years, from a decade ago, or from last night. You know, you couldn't tell from the story what the real context of it was. So there were a lot of indicators that I wasn't the only one. But I was also, you know, I also was of the mindset that coming out of a divorce, he was probably a rebound, you know, in a lot of ways, in that I was trying really hard not to just jump right back in to just needing to be married, just needing to be with someone and things like that. So I was also okay with having a really good time. We had great dates. We had great chemistry, you know, for lack of a better way to put it. And I always had a good time. We'd go golfing. Sometimes we'd do nightlife stuff. You know, we would just always be doing something fun. And the bottom line is, girls, especially, you know, divorcees with kids at home, need some fun in their lives. They need some levity. And I mean, I'm a pretty upbeat person, but having a man show me a good time just takes me right over the edge.
So it sounds like, you know, obviously you didn't love to be in that situation, but you love being with him more than
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. And so, you know, I don't know if it was at about the 8 or 9 month mark that I now know that I started being the only one. That I don't know how long I could have gone necessarily if he would have just continued to run a rotation for years and I would have truly been just one of many. I don't know, you know, because that's kind of hard on the female psyche.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but I know I had a great time with him. We were spending 2 days a week together. We got to where we spent every holiday together. I was clearly the number one person in the rotation pretty quickly. So that works to your advantage too, because if you're not the girl being pushed around a lot to make room for the more important girls, it goes a long way too.
Right. If you're not like every other Tuesday breakfast.
Yeah, exactly.
Baby.
Yeah, and he's coming like hungover and all assy, still in his clothes from last night, smelling like other chicks.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, what he says to me is that I made it easy, that I was easy to be around. We always had a good time.
Stable.
Yeah, I have pretty stable moods, which goes a long way. So I'm not going into, you know, hysterics whenever it's been a little while or when there's evidence of another girl or something. I'm not that person. So it goes a long way.
So it sounds like Fort Worth that she really didn't ever drain your energy.
No.
I drain other things.
Exactly. But, and this is one thing that she didn't, I mean, you know, she had been coming out of the divorce, what, 2 years?
Yeah.
My role in her life is to have a good time, you know, and so that was my goal to provide, because she, you know, if you have like a mom, she's got job responsibilities, she answers to her parents, you know, she worked for her dad at the time.
Yeah.
She's got an ex-husband to manage and 3 kids in the house. You know, she doesn't need a lot of me.
Yeah.
She just needs to have a good time when she's out.
Yeah.
You know, and that's my job, is to make sure she has a good time. And we've talked about this, like characteristics of women that men like: easy, stable mood, dependable. I mean, these are all the things that girls are not. You know, they're flaky, they're moody, they're undependable. And then when a girl does actually show up with these qualities and consistently over time, you know, you're like, well, shit, this is gonna be hard to replace.
Aw.
Now, why do you think so many girls are like that today?
I don't know if it's just today.
No, I think it's becoming more evident. I think we have it in our faces more today because of just, I mean, this makes me sound very old, but I think because of social media, we just see it more, but it's always been there.
I think girls used to get away with things less. You know, girls they're very anonymous today. You know, even like, especially with the apps. And we've talked about this. Because like in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, I mean, a girl might meet 5, 10 guys that were eligible bachelors before she got married. You know, and if you fucked something up, you didn't want to fuck up your date because he was a referral from your church, or a girlfriend had said, hey, I'm going to set you up with my boyfriend's brother. So you didn't just like not show up.
Yeah, there were a lot of
and
connections.
Today they'll just not show up.
Well, and I do think that before social media, we had a lot more families to answer to, grandparents watching us. People were just more involved in one another's real lives in person, and now we're just not.
For good and bad, but generally it kept people in line.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting. One of the things I've noticed is that, like, especially when I read more just like historical novels and stuff, you know, not that the focus is necessarily on you know, the dating dynamics, but you just get a sense. And older women really policed younger women. Like,
Very much so.
Yes.
I think that there's this big thing like, oh, like man needs to kind of like you get this in some aspects of the red pill circles about, you know, men need to like, you know, get their women in line. It's like, well, that never was really the case. It was always like the other women,
It was.
the women in line, and the men would keep the other men in line. It was
Yeah.
like both sexes police themselves. If and I think that one of the things that we saw with I guess the boomer generation is that women stopped policing their daughters.
Yeah, it's true.
And it was kind of like, and I don't know whether some of that was, you know, regret that they didn't get to do slut it up when they were younger, or I don't know, whatever sort of, you know, entitlement or resentment was part of it, but they were, or maybe it came from a positive sort of feeling that they wanted their daughter to have opportunities that they didn't have, but they didn't guide that in a constructive way, because the result was sort of like, well, figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like, okay, I'm on OnlyFans now.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah, that's an excellent point. We see that a lot, you know, and we talk about that, you know, because even now, you know, with younger girls in my circles that are dear friends, and I'll kind of do that with them where I'm like, let's not do this, let's do trying really hard to kind of mentor and be the word of advice when it comes to dating and relationships that apparently their mothers or grandmothers either don't know or are not telling them.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line is they either listen or they hide it.
They hide it. Yeah.
And a lot of, you know, it always comes out, unfortunately, but, you know, that goes with the anonymity that we're seeing more now than ever before.
Yeah. Now,
we've never been more out there while also being completely anonymous at the same time.
Right. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, I do think that there is a growing kind of backlash, but it's going to be interesting to see how it actually plays out, because when you do have still so much anonymity, you know, there's going to be, I think a lot of girls are still going to go through this phase at a very minimum where they have to sort of explore and see for themselves. Now, one thing I wanted to ask about your relationship, and Bunny, you're obviously high openness, so I don't think you're gonna.
I'm okay. I'm an open book.
So, well, first off, you know, you said you're not like that. You're much more level yourself. But a lot of other women haven't been. What was there some? Has that just always been your natural disposition? You've been different in some way from other women, or is that something that you just developed over time?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think to an extent maybe, but the bottom line, I had a grandmother who guided me. I had a mother who guided me. Both of these women were also very upbeat, peacemaking, level-headed women also who adored their husbands. So and I'm an only child, so I didn't have a lot of chaos in the house or anything. My parents are both very optimistic, level-headed, lovely people. I truly had like a Mayberry upbringing. I had from my family all the way around. So I have that advantage, but at the same time, the women in my life definitely guided me. Now, when I was, I would say 16, 17, 18, you know, kind of starting with that first boyfriend, I was probably a little bit of a shit show. I mean, I do remember like yelling at him and throwing little temper tantrums and just being a little brat. But I think I saw around me pretty quickly that people who were first of all, in happy, stable relationships, and who other people did not look at like they were fucking nuts, were not behaving that way.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that I could have gone either way. I think I could have been a nightmare had that not been tempered. But I do like to believe that I made a cognitive choice to be a person that other people didn't look at like a void. You know, she's absolutely insane, because that's how it comes across when a girl starts losing her shit. She is looked at like she has lost her mind. Like there needs to be a ritual or something to exercise it.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you made that comment about the conscious choice, because I do think to a certain extent, the reason women do that, I mean, no doubt with some women, they can't really help themselves. They might, especially if they've been really let down by men before.
I think it's fewer than they would like you to believe, though.
Yeah.
That's actually like in their wiring.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think it's actually like a substantial amount of trauma for those women. Like they have to have some serious trust issues that causes them to just have knee-jerk hysteria.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of women, it is more of an ego thing.
Yes.
They feel like, well, why should I not? Like, why do I not? Who says I can't throw a tantrum?
Right.
Why can't I do it? A guy should accept me even if I, am a mess, because, and it's a self-destructive tendency, but.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's like the old Marilyn Monroe quote about, take me at my worst, or you don't deserve my best, or whatnot. And women have taken that and run with it.
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe is not exactly the best role model.
No.
Now, so that obviously was a huge aspect of what made this relationship successful, but how much of it was sex?
Of ours, of Fort Worth and mine?
Yeah. I mean, because here's a question I have. This is the more like personal question. You obviously seem to be high sex drive.
Yes.
We
had a great sex life. Make no mistake. But I do think, and I put sex very high on the successful relationship chain.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of sex, we also always enjoyed one another's company.
Right.
We were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah.
You can have sexually compatible people that should not be together.
Yeah.
Somebody that you have a great compatibility with, but they're just a terrible person for you to actually have a romantic or interpersonal relationship with.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just clicks on both sides.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest like indicator of sexual compatibilities? Is it sex drive?
Woman. No, I think maybe the woman's sex drive, but one thing that I think, and we talk about this we talk about all this stuff quite a bit. Let's just face it, is that women can truly make or break a sexual experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy brings his A game. The woman can either lie there like a dud, be tense, be quiet, be non-responsive, just essentially decide that she's not going to have a good time. Or she can enjoy herself. She can actively participate to whatever extent she's comfortable with. She can relax and enjoy. She's there anyway. She might as well enjoy the fact that she has a cock in her. So, but then his responses to her feedback go a long way and create a really great sexual experience. That doesn't make a difference on dick size. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference in his skills. it makes a difference in, is she open and enthusiastic, or is she actively working against you having a nice time in the bedroom?
Why do you think women do that? Why do you think it's such a common thing for women to have that block?
Slut shaming, bad wiring, bad history, somebody along the way forced her to do something that she didn't like, and so she doesn't like it again.
Body issues,
very, a lot of
turn the lights off.
There are a lot of problems with confidence issues with women. They don't want to be naked, they don't want to be folded up, they don't want to be hanging down, there are all kinds of things that just make us very uncomfortable. If she lets it. But like, I like to remind women in particular, but I think it's an important point here, is the bottom line is, when has it ever happened when a man and a woman have been about to have sex, they take their clothes off, and he sees her and says, "Oh no, put your clothes back on, we're not doing this." Right. This never happens. I mean, it's just, when does that ever happen? So you might as well enjoy it. You rock it, and you are actively involved, and have a great time.
Yeah, you'd have to have some like DARPA design spandex. that would cause a guy to be like, "Whoa, that's wasn't expecting that."
I mean, I'm sure it happens, but
there's some stories of close calls.
Yeah.
But the guy, I think it's probably like deep down in our genetics to go for it no matter what.
Yeah, the guy's like,
I can breathe. I can breathe. I'm going to keep moving.
Yeah. I'm just going to go on and nail this one down.
Exactly.
Now, related to this, I mean, do you think, because I know you mentioned Fort Worth, you mentioned Black Dragon earlier, so it sounds like he was one of your influences. And I know he talked about sex drive being kind of like it was almost set. I mean, do you share that perspective? Do you think
one more time?
Well, that a person's sex drive is sort of independent of the person that they're with. So would you agree with that, or would you disagree?
I would probably disagree, and I agree with a lot of this stuff. I mean, like the 20-second rule and a soft next. I mean, he's got some great material that I saw with him first.
Yeah.
So I would not agree with that. I think the right people, or the right coach in a way, can bring out the best performance in people.
Yeah.
And especially with age. I mean, girls sometimes just need a few years.
Yeah.
Of like, being out amongst guys and having some experiences to be more comfortable with themselves. So I don't think it's that. And and we mentioned this quite often, in our little world here in Twitter, it's like a bell curve. We're on the far end of high sex drive people. Mm-hmm. Because right in the middle, you're on the far left, you have incels. This which is a small group also. But in the middle, you have guys that have sex once or twice a week or once or twice a month with their overweight wife, and they're happy.
Yeah.
That's the majority of guys.
Sure.
The majority of guys are not like sharks in the water. They're like, I just want to work on my muscle car.
Yeah.
I just want to do some woodworking, follow my fancy football, and go to work.
But I do think along those lines, even otherwise strong couples, if they have a decent sexual relationship, they can be pretty good.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can raise a family and get all the kids to soccer or whatnot, get them raised, go fishing, go RVing, and they have a great life.
We forget that we're on the far end of I would say, the sexual continuum.
We have high sex drives, but we very rarely got together. When I was part of the rotation, it was a date and sex and a day. It wasn't like, I wasn't ever just fuck buddy status. I guess I should say that.
Mm-hmm.
I like going out. Or
Yeah.
yeah.
We like being social and having a good time and having experiences. And I think that goes a long way in building that compatibility also.
So you would say that you always had a high sex drive even prior to the relationship.
Yeah, and I agree with what you guys are saying about if I had ended up married to someone or dating someone who wasn't as high a sex drive, I think you're gonna laugh at this. I think I could have adjusted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whenever he laughs because if circumstances come up and we don't have sex for a couple of days in a row, that's the only time I ever get upset.
It's crazy. Well, and you can take guys that are high sex drive, like in college and in their early 20s. You add in the high pressure career.
Yeah.
You add in the sweet little wife who's okay with whatever.
Yeah.
And then the kids come. It just kind of gets squeezed out sometimes.
It's true.
As far as a priority. And then after the kids are out, they kind of like pick it back up.
Or they divorce.
Right. So that was a good segue to the next question. You would say that kids definitely affected your experience of wanting to have sex, or
No.
It's literally, it's how much time do we have, and do we have to have sex on the closet floor?
Right.
Listen, I had the best advice that I read in a book just by happenstance when I was 19 years old, and it said the first thing that you teach children when you have them is when mommy and daddy's door is closed, you don't open it.
Yeah.
It's like we had a saying in my family when I was raising our kids, fire, broken bones, blood. It was like, if it's a critical emergency, fire, broken bones, or blood, then you can come running into the house and tell us. But otherwise, you're going to figure it out, you know.
I think,
and that's not only sexually speaking, that's just in general. But whenever I read that blurb about the closed door rule in the master bedroom closed door rule, it hit home that has to be a priority. I wasn't taught that by my parents. I wasn't taught that by my grandparents. In fact, my parents and I still haven't had the sex talk. But I knew that it was a priority because that's what separates romantic relationships from everyone else. You can have great chemistry with a lot of people, but you're having sex with this person.
Yeah. One of the things, Fort Worth, I know that you've mentioned it quite a bit, and I think it makes sense, especially considering you're very involved with the fitness industry. But I've wondered, because you see all this stuff about sex rates going down.
Yeah.
People just not having as much sex. And I do think that porn probably makes an impact on that. Curious about your thoughts on that. But I think what's always missed, and you talk about this a lot, is just people have gotten so fat.
Yeah.
When you're that fat, you don't even really, you're so sluggish that I bet a lot of those people don't even necessarily want to have as much sex. But even more relevantly, they're not, the person that they're with, if they're also fat, you're not necessarily even really attracted to them.
Yeah, it's not a sexy relationship.
Yeah.
Per se. Well, when we convey this, your average American is like 30 to 50 pounds overweight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 90% of it. Make no mistake, it's not 50%, it's not 70%. Go to the mall. You're in a very, New York City, Miami,
exceptions,
San Diego, different.
Yeah.
But you go to Mississippi, go to Florida, everybody's a circle. So you don't have to be my 600-pound life to be overweight and affected.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you feel like shit. You're carrying too much weight. It's hard on all your organs. Guys, dicks don't work by the age of 35 because they're 50 pounds overweight. And you're like, Did you
They've
not
also lost
notice?
half their dick.
Huh?
They've also lost half their dick.
Yeah, exactly,
seriously,
exactly.
it's sucked into
So
their body.
all these things, yeah. I don't know that much about porn affecting you. You would know more affecting the what would you call it, the sex rate
Mhm.
or the bang rate. But it's impossible for obesity to not affect people.
Well, and the bottom line is the body was created to move. We talk even on weeks when we are more busy with work. Now, make no mistake, we always prioritize workouts, but their quality of workout, ebbs and flows for everyone who is in fitness. And when we're not getting the quality of workouts or the consistency that we like for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 days at a time, even we feel sluggish. We don't have as much energy. You don't want to work out. You don't have the energy to work out. You need to work out. The more you need to work out, the less energy and want to you have to actually do it. So if that happens to us, who literally will work out 1 or 2 days a week, 7 days a week since we were each 14 years old, if that happens to us, imagine the average population who hasn't done any consistent exercise in 3, 4, 10 years. I mean, it can't help but ruin their sex drive. They don't want to do anything, much less fuck.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious about this because I get questions a lot about meeting girls at gyms and what's the deal with gym girls? Is it a good target? And I was not like a super gym guy. Like, it was never my spot. So I've kind of given more advice about you don't want to be doing straight up cold approach trying to pull girls directly, but think of it more of like a scene, and kind of, if you're going to see that girl over and over again, the sort of plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious about it with you. I mean, first off, like, how would you run gym game? And second off, just keep it on the sex question. I mean, would you say that gym girls are on average more interested in sex? Like, are girls who prioritize fitness more horny?
Yes, because you're also, I mean, just think about like athletic girls that played soccer. And I noticed this early on, girls that played college sports, they're just more physical or dancers, like classic dancers. Any girls that are aware of their body, know where they're at in space, they have proprioception, they're just they feel better and they enjoy it more. And there's no body, they're very comfortable being naked. So there's comfort with their own body and they're comfortable around you and they're very physical, as opposed to girls that are very disconnected and it's like something's happening to them and they're like, what is happening to me? It's a completely different experience.
And right down to even when you're trying to get them to move their body a certain way in the sexual encounters, they have no.
Do it. So when you're dealing with fitness or athletic girls, you're dealing with girls that do understand their own body. They'll tend to have higher testosterone. They feel better, lower body fat. There's just no downside.
Yeah.
And I've never ran into the exact opposite. Where it shuts them, they're not interested, and they're in a sexy, sexually charged atmosphere generally.
Yeah. Even drab gyms are still bodies working and giving, exerting force, and it's just hot. It's just but I will say he did meet his ex-wife in the gym, so he's the ultimate source for a gym game.
Slow
game. Okay.
Yeah, just like you described, it's not a good place to like stop them as they're walking and get them to do a quarter turn. No, just like you said, just slow. And it's like being in a club together. You're going to see them again. Hey, how's it going? Hey, like you're the mayor. Hey, what's up?
Exactly.
We did a podcast on it, and I think she did most of the talking. And and it's good. You want to hear it from a girl. How does this work?
And and why? Because so many, a ridiculous number of men approach even the most average girl over the course of a single workout. It's
true.
It's more than anyone even fathoms that doesn't experience it. So you have to set yourself apart by not interrupting her set one more fucking time.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's slow, just like you said.
It's so annoying.
Social, it's like social circle game. You get to know them over time.
Yeah.
Because you're always in the same place. And you have a common interest.
And then most of the time she'll end up pursuing you because you're different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bunny, I mean, do you know quite a bit about this stuff? Have you picked up some girls at the gym yourself?
I have not picked up girls at the gym. I've picked up girls at bars.
Okay. So tell me about that and tell me
I was kidding when you asked that question.
Tell me about that and tell me how it slots into your relationship. So tell me a little bit about your current dynamic.
So most of the girls that I've picked up have been pre us.
Okay.
I mean, I have certainly taken girls from the bar to the bedroom, and Fort Worth has enjoyed that very much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a while.
Okay.
That's mainly because we work so much. In all fairness, it's not from lack of want to.
Yeah, it certainly adds a whole new dynamic, but there's definitely a lot more, I would say, and I haven't personally done this. I haven't been in that sort of situation, but I would imagine that when you bring a third person into the dynamic, it there's a lot more things that you have to be aware of. It's not quite as simple and straightforward as if you were single and you were to pick up a girl at like a bar or whatever.
Right. Well, and we're not a couple that we're together, but we also have a girlfriend or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably much to his chagrin, but we do have fun whenever the opportunity comes up and we're able to bring someone in. I think the key there and the real question is girls tend to be more open to that. Women in my kind of situation tend to be more open to playing with others when there's a really good sense of communication. First of all, you have to know that you're not in competition with the other girl. You have to feel like you have to know ahead of time what would be okay to say or do, what's not okay to say or do. We call it doing business. It's not very sexy on the front end, but it sure allows everyone to have a good time once it's all said and done. And then you just have even more sexy good time afterwards because you have these really hot memories that you can feed on.
Yeah, it sounds like it's important to make sure that your connection doesn't get affected by it.
Like for example, I don't want to just speak in generalities, but at the same time, I don't know how extensive you want me to go. Like we have a rule where he doesn't kiss other girls.
Right.
Does that make sense? I can kiss other girls. He doesn't kiss other girls.
Yeah. Right.
So because that's an intimate thing to me. That's important to me. I know it sounds silly, he can fuck other girls while we're all in the room together, but that I can see as being a disconnected thing.
Mm-hmm. And do you guys only do it together? There's not
Yes.
No. Yeah. What do we say? It's not cheating if the other person's in the room.
It's not cheating if the other person's in the room and actively involved. Make no mistake, because I'm not a watcher. I like to do. So I don't tap out of stuff. I don't sit back or take bathroom breaks. I'm high sex drive. So I'm always actively, I'm always the center of attention. No, I'm always actively involved. So it goes a long way.
Now, this makes perfect sense to me, but I'm just curious, do you think that relationships that are more just open from the standpoint of, well, you can go see other people. Do you feel like those are sustainable over the long term, or do you feel like it inevitably starts to get, like, the connection starts to fray, you get
You mean
drawn?
where they have, Pat, you mean like where like she'll go or he'll go out on dates with other people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. Because when you're high sex drive, you run into other high sex drive people. It's kind of like we seek each other out.
Yeah.
Or we can tell each other in a room.
In a group.
Yeah. But we have like a couple of friends who have been married for years, have amazing marriages, have kids, the whole 9 yards, and they have, say, boyfriends or girlfriends on the side that are completely open. We can't wrap our heads around that.
It's crazy how jarring it is still when somebody, oh yeah, she came back from seeing her boyfriend and we were like,
what?
I mean, the whole thing is like the record. You're like,
Yeah.
what? Because again, everybody finds their own level.
Yeah.
Be it monogamy, bisexual women, whatever it is, they find their own level, but it's always that one step beyond. You're like, what the hell? How do they do that?
Exactly. That doesn't even sound fun.
And a lot of it is situational.
Yeah.
I mean, these aren't things that you could do when you have like little ones. Logistically,
Right.
It might be done, but it'd be very difficult and a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
So people in different seasons of their lives do different things.
And I will say, considering the way that we began, where I knew that I was some version of a plate, although I didn't use that term. I knew he was with other women. And so it's just kind of the way we started.
Right.
In a lot of ways. We weren't always in the same room together back then, but at the same time, it's easier to wrap our heads around that. Now, I say that with the understanding that I bought a book through Adam and Eve or something. I'm 44 years old. I was 19 or 20 years old at the time. My husband never knew I owned this book, but it was called like How to Have a Threesome or something like that. I mean, so I've always had an interest in or seen the excitement and the thrill of kind of going outside of that man and woman only super monogamous relationship. So I've always been open to it. It was just since Fort Worth that I was actually able to play with that a little bit. But again, we fell into it so naturally because it just was what we were already doing to an extent.
Right. And I'm wondering, because you hear so much stuff in the manosphere that talks about, you obviously have these old books like My Secret Garden, right? Finding Friday.
Very popular.
Very popular. Now, how do you feel, I mean, now that we've talked about women and sort of the variations in sex drive and how a lot of women maybe really aren't necessarily into sex as much, they don't have as much comfort with their bodies. Do you feel like that is a very universal thing for women to have these kind of fantasies?
I think all women are bisexual. All women who are sexually minded at all. Now, I think that there are about 10% of women across the board who are pretty asexual. But all women, to an extent, whether they would ever explore it or not is different, are bisexual. Because women are beautiful creatures. They have curves. They have all kinds of things happening. There are all kinds of just really cool, beautiful things about them. Where men, you see a man naked and you love him, but if you look at just the parts, it's not always all that attractive. Mm-hmm. Women have attractive parts. We were created to be pleasing on the eyes. So I do think that even if a woman doesn't think of herself as bisexual, doesn't think about what she would do with another woman sexually, there's an appreciation there that men don't have for each other across the board.
Yeah. And And have you talked to other women about this, and they've
Yes.
like, yeah,
and they agree completely.
Yeah.
And this is not even, this isn't even necessarily other high sex drive women. It's just average women. Because, you know, as you can imagine, even with my girlfriends, sex is a pretty hot topic for me. And if my friends aren't having a lot of sex, I get on to them about it.
You just because, I mean, are you have you seen, like, within relationships around you, that when the sex drops off, that just the quality of the relationship goes down?
Completely devolves. Yeah, it's sad. It's sad, but it's true.
It may be a leading indicator.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's like that old, you know, keep his belly full and his balls empty.
Exactly. I love that.
So what else would you have? We got about like 5 minutes left here. What else would you say to me about game today? Like, what, like, because I know that Fort Worth, you've got a compendium of Chateau Hartrice stuff.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that Hartrice material, that it works on every woman? Or do you feel like it works on certain types of women more, or certain types of, like, if you're trying to get, for instance, just kind of go into Hartrice, and do you feel like
it works for most women? And the good thing is he explores the nuances of that. You know, over time, you have to kind of like dig in. But I always say game does not work on damaged women. You know, girls with a history of like bad drug abuse, sexual abuse, alcoholism, because they react more aggressively. You know, they can't laugh at themselves. They can't laugh at the situation, and they're very, what would you say, negative on men.
Yeah.
So you're walking into a hospital because you're looking for yes girls, and you can work with maybe girls, but you want to get away from no girls. And I think the game helps you start filtering those girls out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense for sure. I mean, do you feel like girls that, like, are there certain professions that girls tend to respond better to gaming than others?
Teachers.
I think any feminine profession, and I've always said like elementary school teachers, nurses, even though all the guys get all worked up because they might have had one bad experience.
Well, he also has a fetish for nurses.
Yeah,
Make no mistake.
let's not talk about that.
He's getting excited right now.
I know. And what is the third? Teachers, nurses, and there's a third.
Well, and
secretaries, administrative assistants.
Yeah.
How many guys have ended up marrying their secretary? But the interesting thing is, even your harder, more masculine attorneys, physicians, because you never bring up their profession, running game on them is refreshing.
Right.
They get to feel like a sexy girl, and it works on them too. It's really bizarre, but you approach them like you would any girl, and they respond. That's the key.
Yeah, I'm because they're masculine for so much of the day, that to have somebody kind of activated and pull it out of them. Yeah, I think it's extra important.
Like, this guy doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
This is different.
What do you think is like the most valuable piece of all of Chateau Hartrice work that you would want guys to know about?
The inner confidence, the self-confidence. What do they say? Irrational self-confidence or overconfidence, where you believe it before it even happens. And it's the key, because a lot of these guys are coming in with no history, no wins. So they have to believe that they can, and approach these girls like they just got out of bed with two other ones. And even if it's just in their head, the confidence that they carry will, when they're talking, it comes out. And then over time, they start building up those wins. And then they're actually the guy that just got out of bed with two girls.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
The inner
confidence is the the first and the key component.
And what's the best way for a guy to develop that?
I say read the books, because it all comes together. Knowing your stuff, practicing, and then getting yourself into an environment that you can repeat. That's where the logistics come in. But it's just like working out. You got to repeat and practice and get lots of reps in. That's why I tell guys, get online, text a lot of girls, even the ones you have no intention of ever meeting, to find out what works. And that way, when it does matter, you're very natural moving into it.
Yeah. And then you do have a confidence because you've built the reps in.
Yeah.
You've done the work.
You got to do the reps, but beginning, you got to have a goal, mental goal. Then you put in the reps, and then you will get the results. What do you think, Pat?
No, I agree with that. I guess what I'm thinking of is what is the best ROI for guys to put in reps today? Because I mean, with that thread I put out the other day, I kind of look at the 4 categories of game as being online, day game, night game, social circle. It sounds like you lean a little bit more towards online just because of the efficiency of being able to.
The volume, you're going to reach a lot. I mean, it's just like anything else. You're talking to us. We're not New York City. We didn't have to meet for lunch, The total volume, and as you know, in the day gamers that I've talked to, it's a very low conversion. I mean, that's a lot to ask of a guy to go out to a mall for 3 hours, 3 times a week to get 3 numbers and not convert any of them. I mean, it's a very special type of man that can build that up in the US. If you're like over in Europe where there's foot traffic all day, and like Troy Francis, he actually travels to the highest traffic areas. That's completely different. But for an American guy and a guy over 30, they're going to be like, "Sir, please get away from me. I will mace you."
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
We'll shoot you in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everybody's armed. I mean, that's what would happen. Maybe New York City streets are different, but again, I think it's the most efficient way of getting in the reps.
Well, New York is, I mean, it's one of the more European. I would actually go so far as to say the most European of American cities, and I say that in a very strange way because it's obviously distinctly American, with the high density and the skyscrapers, but when it comes to the demographics, I think a solid quarter of the white people there are European. So you already have a lot of Europeans there to begin with. And because there is all this foot traffic, it is a very effective city to do day game, but it's a very different kind of day game than what you would do in Europe because it's so fast paced and you have that kind of New York.
Oh, interesting.
Like fuck off kind of energy.
Yeah.
So you have to. There's a lot more aggressiveness with it, and but you have parks and stuff, and parks are better environments to go and approach girls. Because girls will be like sitting by park benches, and there's a lot of homeless people sitting around too now these days.
Pick your target.
Yeah, kind of messing up the day game situation. I don't think any city from a volume, like just sheer numbers and like design is better than London. I think that's why London was literally the capital of day game because you have as many people in it as New York pretty much, and it's maybe even more international. And it's so walkable. I mean, London very often feels like just a million little towns like networked together. Very, very pleasant, very casual. And then of course you have all these like continental European cities, which can be really great too. And you have obviously beautiful women, but they tend to be smaller. Right. So, and you don't have the ease of language necessarily, although a good number of girls speak English. So I agree with you. I mean, I totally get the reason. And I think one of the real takeaways for guys here is that it's not that there is only one right way to do it, but you should know what works for you and you should stick with it.
Yeah.
Like, you had the system where you had the bars lined up, you had all the venues lined up, and you had the profile, and you would meet girls online, and there's a system you could constantly meet girls over and over again through that. And you didn't have to spend bandwidth trying to like overthink how to go about things. I think a lot of I was just gonna say, I think a lot of guys get to be like purists and they say, well, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. Or even if guys would find really success with one method because of their own self-confidence issues, they'll start to say to themselves, well, like they almost like won't let themselves be successful in a certain domain if it was too easy.
Interesting. Well,
It's like, I gotta, be
I
able
have
to
to do it this way.
Yeah, I have to be able to like cold approach a 10 at a club and like get past security. And if she doesn't take me home, then I'm a beta. It's like they're
Right. Yeah, it's a game. Yeah.
So but like you were saying, I think that there are some guys that day game, it's almost like they're not satisfied simply to have like a full belly. Like they need to feel like the hunt.
I can see that.
So
It's part of it. How
Yeah.
they meet this girl is part of it, because you can't tell me that you couldn't put a day gamer and help him with the profile and get him into a meeting, picking up girls at a bar. It wouldn't do well. I mean, it'd be like over and over and over. The man would be so tired, just because he's comfortable.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm sure that it's how they do the hunt that matters,
Yeah.
because they know that there's easier ways to meet girls, but it's part of it.
Well, and I will say, being in fitness professionally, you're in the gym at 4:30 a.m. You're leaving the gym at 9 p.m.
Mhm.
That allows for 15 minutes here and there to manage things. We don't have. I mean, he didn't have 3 hours to go to the most foot trafficked area of the city and meet women.
Right.
He needed to nap during that time. But I mean, it's a little bit different. I think it also depends on what your career path is, what your time management's like, things
Your
of that
comfort.
nature.
I mean, we talk about this. If you're an HVAC technician, you lay asphalt, you do construction, you got to leave the house at 4:30 in the morning, or you do oil and gas on a rig. Where the hell are you going to meet girls? You might not see a chick for a few days.
And I do think that that's also just a symptom of living in Texas. Literally everything, you can't go anywhere without driving for half an hour.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't care if
2
it's,
hours.
all over the place. It's a very spread out state. It's very car centric. And you're just making us jealous talking about London, because we want to live in a fully walkable city, probably as bad as we want to have sex every day. It is a deep desire for us, and we already live in a pretty walkable area. We everything that we do work wise and life wise is within a 1 mile radius, but day game here would be very difficult.
Mhm.
And I have no doubt that Fort Worth would have been great at day game, but he's been in fitness his entire professional career as a real adult, and so the hours in the day just wouldn't ever jive with something like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think, last subject to touch on before we close out. And one of the things you always talk about Fort Worth is you kind of mentioned it right here. Like if you're on a rig, if you're a construction worker, you're just not really around women pretty much at all. Certainly not attractive women. If you want to meet women, a really easy way to do it is to connect your job to a place where women are going to be. Like
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
bartender. I mean, I know you've mentioned this, and I was so happy to see it, because there might not be like even a better job than bartender.
Oh,
No,
it's perfect.
No.
Yeah. It's especially if you're like a good looking bartender. You're like it's just you have girls there with the express intent.
Oh yeah,
Like yeah. It's
absolutely. I mean, it's like I said, the biggest player I ever saw was at a gym that I was at in Arlington back in the 80s. And he would literally take his gym bag and throw it through the back window of his Corolla because it did have a window and and he was with a new girl every night, just Jack and tan and just bartending and living his life. Nothing else really mattered.
And then you're actually getting paid for meeting women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing beats that.
You're getting paid for getting laid.
That's right.
It's
Right.
Write that down.
And it's all legal.
Exactly.
For once.
For once.
Not just in Vegas.
I mean, I can imagine what it's like in New York City. I mean, for a guy to have an apartment near his bar that he's working at.
Yeah, and the great thing is that there's like a bar underneath every apartment. So
Perfect.
you just gotta like, connect with the one on your block.
Perfect.
But this is last quick question. Do you feel like, I mean, just from that story of that guy you knew, because you hear some guys who will say like, well, money, like if you don't have money, girls aren't interested in you. And how much of a role do you feel like money plays in attraction?
I think it makes it easier, but I'm talking about a minimum. If you're struggling with bills, it's going to be tough, but not impossible. Just like there's enough skateboarders, local musicians, bodybuilders with a mattress on their floor that are running a rotation of sevens through constantly. It has nothing to do with your outcomes. But let's say by the time I was in my 40s and went through the divorce, it was nice to be able to have a nice apartment. It was nice to be able to not look at the bill. It's nice to not worry about if you need to buy some decent clothes for an event. That's about as far as it takes you, unless you're super wealthy. But everything below yachts and Rolls Royces and penthouses, everything below that, it's a wash.
I will say from a female perspective, though, a man who is financially struggling, it's hard for him to have strong self-confidence if he's worried about money. So he has, either he has to be in a living situation where even if he's a struggling musician who's on the floor of a buddy's apartment, he's not worried about it. He's okay with that.
That's who he is.
And he can run a rotation of girls where if his business is failing and he's struggling to pay his employees, it's going to be kind of hard.
It's not going to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I've always looked at it like it was an amplifier of desire. So if you have all this desirable stuff about you and then you have money, then you're like it makes you seem like more of a complete package, and it can make and you can provide experiences. That's especially the case when you get to the super rich level, as you said. I think that's almost a different story. When you get the super rich level, maybe you can start to buy desire to a certain extent.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing I noticed about money that I thought was really interesting was that it seems to scale on age. So if you're a guy in your 20s, particularly like your early 20s, it just doesn't matter at all. It could not matter less. But if you are in your 40s and you're broke, then there's a way different perception around you. And I think that perception, like you'd have to have an extra strong frame, kind of to your point of like not caring.
Yes.
In order to compensate it, because people are, a girl's going to be like, okay, he's 25. He hasn't figured stuff out yet, whatever. But it's like, oh, he's like 50. He doesn't have it like why has he got a mattress on the floor? Like,
But here's the good thing about that from the female end of things. They can say, well, he was really taken to the cleaners.
Yeah.
In his divorce, he's still recovering financially from that. We can do a lot of mental gymnastics when the attraction is strong for the man.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense.
And you can see that he, you forget girls will create entire futures for you that don't even exist. So it'll be like, well, he's working on his da-da-da. He's really gonna make it once he sells this or whatever it is. Girls can make excuses for even the 40-year-old who's sleeping on a mattress in his parents' basement.
So true. So true. Well, go ahead.
I mean, I definitely, with the guys on Twitter, I'm like adamant about you don't have to have money to do well. In game, if you have game running, it just helps down the road.
It definitely helps. And well, I mean, just think of even one of our date nights out would probably ran $200 to $300 a night, and that's not including a hotel room. That's not it's just the drinks and the covers for just moving around the city. So there is a certain level there, and that's dependent on where you are, but it's still not a cheap adventure to run a rotation or to date a lot of women or to go on multiple first dates.
There's a sort of cost of doing business.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of these guys, they get it down. That's why they do the coffee date. I mean, if you ask them, they'll go, I've got a budget for this.
Yeah, that's why they do the park dates or
the
picnic dates or the coffee dates or any of that's a little bit lower overhead.
Kind of like you said, there's not one way.
Yeah.
There's ways that we've seen work better than others generally, but if a guy's getting results, that's all that matters.
Yeah. We want everybody to win.
They got to play to their advantages. Use
exactly the strengths.
Yeah. Well, Fort Worth Bunny, I appreciate this so much. It was a great conversation. I think we covered a really wide range of topics.
I think so.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be fantastic for the guys. Let people know how can they. I know you're on Twitter. I'm gonna have the link below for that. Where else can they find you?
FortWorthPlayboy.com.
Yeah.
I have consultation. I have some products. I have the Artiste books and one on Dread.
Yeah.
And Bunny, tell them about your bestseller that just published yesterday.
Well,
Can you say that word on?
Well, I've said fuck like 18 times on this podcast, so I guess he's okay with it.
I hope that's okay.
Yeah. So I have several books that I've written over the course since 2018, but yesterday I just published Fuck Like a Porn Star, which is already my bestseller, which is especially impressive because I've sold a lot of books over the course of the years. But yeah, so I have myplayboysbunny.com and we have our podcast on YouTube under Fort Worth Playboy, and that also has all of our products, links, listings, all the ways to reach us. But I think the very best first step is Twitter at Fort Worth Playboy and my Playboy's Bunny.
That's great. So products you have, Fuck Like a Porn Star. What other products you have?
I also have an online dating profile book, Magic Bullet Online Dating Profile Handbook. I have one-itis because that is a real problem, is guys who get hooked on this soulmate or just one girl and not ever really recovering. So I was dealing with a lot of clients through this dating and relationship that were dealing with a hardcore case of one-itis. So I wrote a one-itis book. And I also have 4. What is instant self-confidence. It's 25 quick steps that you can take all at once or one step at a time. And it's essentially a fake it till you make it, but it gives really good step-by-step instructions as to how to maximize your self-confidence because it's the #1 factor that turns women on.
And Fort Worth, you said you also do consults?
Yeah, we both have a consult.
All right.
Availability. It's on our website. and also on the podcast below.
All right. So I'm going to have the links to all that below.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, guys. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Matt.
having